Hey there, I'm Terrie, and I'm the intuitive healer for folks who have anxiety and want to access their soul evolution and intuition. There's more than meets the eye here as we chat and hang out in these episodes that have spiritual, esoteric, multidimensional, somatic, quantum techniques, tools, and tips to help you get unstuck and move you forward in your day-to-day life. So join me in discovering your path to help you clear anxiety of the past, align your energy to the present, and create your new future. All right, here we go. Oh, everybody, it is so nice to see you guys and to connect with you guys. Thank you for joining us here on the portal. If you're watching on YouTube, you're able to see my next guest. I do want to introduce her to all of you. I'm very excited. Her name is Beatty Cohan. She's an MSWL. Oh God, I'm going to totally butcher this. LCSWAASECT, and is a nationally recognized psychotherapist, sex therapist, author of For Better, For Worse, Forever, Discover the Path to Lasting Love. She's an advice columnist for Dan's Papers in the Hamptons and Palm Beach. She's a national speaker, a national radio and television expert guest, and host of the weekly Ask Beatty show on Progressive Radio Network. She's got a private practice in New York City and East Hampton. So if you're out there, you probably will fall absolutely in love. If you're not already in love with Beatty, you probably want to meet her. So I want to introduce you guys to Beatty. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us here on the portal with Terrie Huberman. And don't forget that if you are watching and you like this episode and you love Beatty, leave us comments at the bottom. Tell us all about the things that you loved about us. Like, subscribe, and share. And Beatty, hello, hello, hello.
Hello, what a generous and lovely introduction. And it's so nice to be seeing you, even though we're on Zoom. This is great, Terrie.
Thankfully with Zoom, I have been able to travel around the world, which is really cool. I have a lot of clients that are in Australia, even Qatar, Asia, all of that. So Zoom's been really, really awesome. And now I get to talk to you, and I'm really excited to hear all about what we decided we were going to talk about, right? Which is why it's so hard to find relationships these days, right?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. But the thing is that over the years, I have, through my research and books and clinical practice, I've identified, and it'll be interesting to hear your reaction and audience reaction. There's basically three reasons why people are having the difficulties that they are difficulty. Beginning with number one. Look, if each of us is not in a good place emotionally and psychologically and psychiatrically, and if we're not willing to work out what I call our unfinished business and skeletons in the closet, even though we can't change history, there's a way to emotionally work through what did and didn't happen in our lives so that we're really able to live in the moments in the present without having one foot in the past and one foot in the present. If we're not willing to do that kind of work, and I have to tell you, Terrie, the majority of people, unfortunately, are not wanting to do it. We want to. They're not. It's hard. It's hard. We would like to, blame somebody, blame social media, blame him, blame her, without really looking within ourselves and dealing with our stuff. And I used to tell my daughter Jordana all the time when she was a little girl that the relationship needs to be the icing on the cake. We need to be the cake. We need to be solid. we need to have our stuff together. And that's number one. And number two, people have to, again, be serious students of really learning the ingredients that go into a healthy relationship. And again, so this takes some work. It takes some due diligence. And number three, I mean, let's look at the divorce rate in this country. Okay, we have an almost 50% divorce rate for first marriages. for second marriages. It's a 67% divorce rate for second marriages. And ask me, what about third marriages? Well, for
Yeah.
third marriages, we're looking at a 71 to 72% divorce rate
Whoa.
for third marriages. If we're looking at domestic violence, 3 women continue to be killed every single day by their so-called intimate partner. If we're looking at teenage dating abuse, and I grew up in Winnipeg, Canada, so it was a few years ago. I'm sure there were things that went on when we dated, but we never heard of teenage dating. We're looking at between 20 to 24 to 45% of the kids are talking about being in either verbal or physical or sexual or some kind of dating abusive relationship. If we're looking at college co-eds, we're looking at the same kind of statistics. So, with all of this bad news and sad news and frightening news, I'm going to go back to the third point, which I started with. We have to be okay. We need to learn the ingredients. So, I did research with 450 people in the Boston, Providence, and Connecticut area. And I'm a very bottom line person. I have no use for psychobabble. If it doesn't work, let's not waste our time talking about it. And I devised a 10-step formula that teaches people exactly how to assess. And I know assess is not a sexy word, it's not a romantic word, but it's an absolutely critical word. How to assess who's right for you and who's wrong for you before committing to any serious relationship. And the formula, I mean, it educates, it empowers, and above all, it keeps you safe. So the formula took me to a place where my first book was published. It took me to the national, international scene. And I was hoping, of course, as a mom, as a wife, that we would then see changes in what is going on in the world of relationships. But unfortunately, the reality is we are in a downward spiral.
Yeah.
There is nothing. Every week on my Ask Beatty radio show, it's like I'm citing these statistics, wanting to see that we're moving forward, because it's ironic
Yeah.
that despite all the self-help books and coaches and therapists, we're really missing the boat. And we're missing the boat because these 3 components have to be there. It's not enough to just learn good communication skills. We've got to get our act together. We have to be willing to do that work. We really need to have clarity about the ingredients, and we need to use this formula, because before I did the book, I would meet somebody and I would say, maybe, I've met a lovely person. I would never, ever, ever say that today. I would meet somebody, and today I've learned over all these years, I'd say, I've met somebody who appears to be lovely.
Appears.
And the research, and in my personal life, Terrie, I'm the most impatient person you could ever find. I want it now. I want it yesterday.
Yep.
I
I
don't
hear
know.
ya.
Professionally, of course, it's different. So what the research found, which is very depressing for me, is that it takes about a year using the formula to really find out who somebody is. It is now, obviously, if there's a lot of red flags, you're not going to stay in for a year. You're going to get out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But the process of discovery and assessment cannot be fast forwarded. We need to play out the points. And I'm a former number 10 junior tennis champion in Canada. You have to play out the points of the game and the match.
Yeah.
And you can't rush it.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And that's the good news. So that if people are really serious, and that's the word, even patients who come into my practice, I say, are you really serious about doing all this? They're going to have to do some work and take this seriously, which people are still not doing the work, and they're still not taking it seriously. So whether you meet somebody online, if you meet somebody at a synagogue or a church, it doesn't matter. We still have to go through the same process of discovery.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because there's 2 things that you said that definitely piqued my interest and my mind also when I deal with a lot of clients, right? Is that it's about accountability and self accountability and self responsibility, and then the anxiety part of wanting to get there right now. But it's
Yeah.
time. And I'm hearing you say that like the process and the formula that you came up with, the 10 steps, it takes about a good year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the thing is like it takes time, right?
Yes.
And from like the more spiritual kind of perspective is like you're taking the you who you are now, and that, let's just say it takes a year, because you found it takes like a year through your research, it takes about a year to be the you who you want to be. You can see that there's a gap, there's space.
Right.
It takes
Right.
time to move you, and that's
Right.
because we have this, it's a multidimensional kind of thing, but we have, it's called space time, where it takes time to move you through a process to get
Right.
to the new you. And people don't want to put in the time. And it's like
Right.
there's an
Right.
acceptance
Right.
that has to happen, because you can get there. You can close that gap. It's not
Right.
impossible. It's not
Right.
impossible.
Right. But you look at like instant messages and we're busy clicking and you hear
Yeah.
the sound on your phone and we want to respond. So that this time element, which
Yeah.
is so critical to play out the points. We've got to play out the points. And I know that we all want to fall in love. We all want relationships. We all want to be loved. We all want to love. And I think it's, as you said, there's this anxiety. We want to reach the end of the story before we've even begun the story. We need to find out what the story is really all about. And when people interview me, they'll say, "Well, Beatty, what do you think are the two most important ingredients that make or break relationships?" And in fact, they're also unsexy and unromantic. It happens to be emotional communication and problem solving. It's like, who wants to hear that? People don't want to hear that.
Nope.
We want to hear about, going to beautiful restaurants, or we want to hear, if you're only rich and famous. I mean, I've had an opportunity over the years. I mean, I did my graduate and postgraduate work at McGill University in Montreal. And after my training, I began in the inner city areas of in the school system. And in the last many, many years, I've had an opportunity to treat some of the so-called wealthiest and most successful people in the United States. And what's so interesting is that the relationship issues,
Yes.
obviously, waiting for the welfare check, I mean, it puts you in a different space. The actual relationship dynamic issues between the rich and famous and the people who are, less, you know, advantaged economically, there aren't differences. We're,
Correct.
we're dealing with the same stuff. We got to get our act together. We got to do better assessments. So there isn't a difference. And people will say, well, you have a lot of money. And I was saying to somebody yesterday, the Tiffany's bracelet and the car, it does it for the day. And if you're lucky, maybe for the week. But then you're back into the same old thing,
Yeah.
dealing with yourself, dealing with your partner. And we've got to get the message out that this is going to take some work. And as I say on my show all the time, we don't need to navigate all of this on our own. If you're lucky to have friends and family, it's wonderful. And if you don't, to be open and willing and have the courage, to reach out and get some good professional help. And by the way, all professional help is not good. And I've seen a
Sure.
lot of harm done
Yes.
over the years by incompetent healers and
Yes.
therapists and
Yes.
people in my field.
Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. Why do you think people don't want to do the work? I mean, I have a reason from like the spiritual aspect, but from like the earth, psychological, psychiatric aspect. Why do people not want to do the work, you think?
It's scary. It's hard. I mean, I see so many people who were, abused as children in a variety of different ways, who grew up in domestic violent homes. We would like to, in a way, just sort of pretend that all of that really didn't happen. And even if we acknowledge, and of course people do, that all of this happened, I think that there's a fear that if I go back, it's going to be too scary and nothing is going to change anyways. And I think the idea of just really trying to not really pretend, but just fast forward is that happened then. This is today. We don't need to deal with that. But the fact is, and I've been a psychotherapist and sex therapist now for over 35 years, and I've treated thousands of people with every conceivable kind of, presenting problem. And what I found is that there is a way to help people really go back and emotionally work through the pain and the trauma and the abuse of various different kinds, because we can't pretend. I mean, we may want to pretend, but
Yeah.
we can't. The body, the mind, the soul, we can't pretend that these things didn't happen, because they always will impact today,
Correct. Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
And again, in our quick fix world of American mental health, and I'm not a fan of American mental health. I mean, there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of damaging work. I mean, there are places in the world of therapy for, behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's many, many different modes. But the fact is that had there been a way to fast forward and short circuit the need to go back and emotionally process what didn't happen, so that you can then fully live in
Yeah.
the present. I would have found this out a long time ago, because I'm so impatient in my personal life. It's like, I'd like none of this to be relevant. Let's forget it all. Let's just talk about today. And we can't fully talk about today unless we work through as best as possible, even though we can't change our history, yesterday.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't. I love everything you're saying because it's so in alignment with a lot of what I teach from an energetic perspective, right? So I hear a lot of what you're saying, and I see in the spiritual community, it's called spiritual bypassing, where you're
Uh-huh.
trying to like gloss over, forget, fast forward, bypass like everything in the past. And so, and this is such a like kink in my craw that I have. Like, I know I'm about to piss off a lot of people in the spiritual community, and I'm okay with it because I stand behind it 1000%. If you buy a rose quartz, that's not going to get you a boyfriend or a girlfriend, right? So,
Right.
like, doing all these rituals and having all these crystals and all of these things as a way of that's how it's going to be, and you're going to create this lovely, wonderful, perfect relationship, I have real problem with, because there's no processing emotionally, just like you said. And what is an emotion? It's an energy in motion.
Right.
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 So if there's no processing of what happened in the past so that you can have a clean, clear present, which is your new platform to jump off of to have that healthy relationship, but you're just trying to like bypass with like yoga, with veganism, with like
Yeah.
rocks and all this. And it's not to say those, because you hit it on the head, like those are just different modalities that can be used complementary to what I call earth work, which is like the psychology and the psychiatry if you need it and all that. You cannot spiritually bypass your past.
Right.
As human beings, we're constantly triggered by something. And if we don't process that
Right.
emotionally,
Right.
it's going to always be a block for us. We're going to make choices and decisions from that aspect, which is just going to continuously create this new pattern. Not a new pattern. We're going to continuously do and live out that old pattern. So,
Exactly. You're exactly right. And you have to look at a lot of people in my field, what their training has been.
correct.
And in our quick fix, I want it yesterday kind of way that we want to deal in our lives. I mean, people have to be very, very careful, and consumers need to ask about what is your theoretical orientation. Is it just going to be, assigning tasks for the day? The tasks are good, but
Yeah,
it's not enough. And,
correct.
and people who've gone through a lot of really traumatic events in their life. I mean, as I say, I wish we could find a way to not have to deal with it and that there wouldn't be any impact at all. But it's not true. And yesterday I was walking around New York City with a friend of mine, actually a rabbi, a woman rabbi, and everybody was plugged in. And we were talking about my book, and we were talking about how people connect or don't connect. And the message, it's so interesting. Everybody's plugged in. There's almost no, even people who are sitting together are looking on their phones. And the
Yep.
message, we have to be so careful that we're not giving the wrong message. The message is clearly stay away from me. Don't talk to me. Don't interact. I used to go to the gym and people would talk, but now you're on a treadmill or
Oh,
you're on the machines and everybody's plugged in either to their phones or something like that. And then we're wondering why
yeah.
there's so much disconnect. We've never seen the loneliness. I mean, there's a real loneliness epidemic. We've never seen such, clinical depression, suicidal ideation. So we've never seen these numbers before, Terry.
Yeah.
And the disconnect, and people will say, well, is it because of COVID? I mean, COVID didn't help, but it didn't cause it.
No, it didn't cause it. It
Cause
exacerbated. Yeah.
it exacerbated it, exactly. And I think that people have to ask themselves, how am I projecting to the world? What am I projecting to the world? Is it a stay away from me? I don't want to look at you kind of thing? Or are you inviting? And yes, we have to be careful who we let into our lives and all of that. But I mean, I see people, I'm thinking of two young men that I treat in Chicago, two separate, and they're in their 20s.
Okay. Ooh,
One
they're
works from home, one works, at the office. They have zero social life. They don't go anywhere. They're on the computer and they game and they think they'd like to have girlfriends, but they really don't do anything. And as far as sex goes, it's really interesting. People are having less sex now than ever before. And these young men, their sex lives happen to revolve around the porn sites. I
yes.
wrote an article for Dance Papers recently. I mean, the statistics of the numbers of hours that people spend on their devices and on the porn sites.
Sure.
It's unbelievable. So we're becoming less and less connected in meaningful ways. And as a result, more and more loneliness, more and more sadness, depression, suicidal, thoughts, suicide, even, people who are actually taking action. Yeah. And so we need to reassess. It's not just, assessing our relationships. On my Ask Beatty segment, every single week, I have a how are you doing segment. And I go through everything. I go through how is your mental health and your relationships and your money and your self-care and your sex life and are you being true to yourself in terms of gender and sexual identification. I want people every single week, I mean ideally, maybe even more frequently, to be honest with themselves about where am I at, how am I doing, and what changes do I need to make? So I have this mantra, acknowledge, address, and resolve as best as you can the things that get in the way of your life and your relationships. So, in my small little way, I want us to be on top of our game, but we need to be honest to figure out where are we in our game. Are we even playing, or are we just watching life, pass us by?
Yeah. That honesty factor is a really, really big factor. I call it being ugly honest. Because
Yes.
a lot of times when we're honest and authentic, we start to realize that there are parts of ourselves that just may not be pretty or perfect.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but in order to be holistic, which is what you were talking about when you were saying you ask about every area of your life, like you have to be honest with every area of your life.
Yes.
I think people don't want to get to that place because of fear of being judged.
And self-judge. And then what do we do when we find out that things are off? We can do nothing. We
Yeah.
can hope and wish and take some crystals and hope that somehow we're going to be transformed, or
Calibrating.
we're going to have to say, I need to do something.
Yeah.
I need to do something. And it's okay if you don't know what to do.
Sure.
And then you have to find a person or persons who can take you by the hand and help you and show you the way.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are they feel they can do it alone. They're their own lone wolf without understanding that when you have the feedback of somebody else, they might be able to give a different perspective.
Right.
And so then your blind spots can be revealed. Like you don't know what you don't know until you have an idea or you know what you know.
Exactly. And I'm thinking of a recent column that I wrote where adult children who want nothing to do with their parents other than, ask their parents for money, have serious problems and don't want to do anything. And there are plenty of people who have serious issues, whether even financial issues, relationship issues, sexual issues, and are not ready or willing to do anything. I don't know if they just hope that some miracle is going to happen and they're going to be catapulted into a better place. So readiness is also something really important. How far do people have to fall? I mean, I've always found that the best time for people to reach out and ask for help is when there's a major crisis. I mean, nobody ever calls me and says, I need help with communication. I mean, that never happens.
Edie, I'm in
Right,
joy. I'm in joy. Everything's going really well. I was wondering if you
right.
could help me out.
No, there's always a disaster with couples in my world. It's always an affair.
Yeah.
It's always an affair.
Yeah.
And with people where they're not in relationships, it's always the depression or anxieties become just impossible to live with. And then it's about not giving a pill, but it's about what is this all about?
Yeah. So I want to bring it back to your 10-step formula because you were mentioning that you have this 10-step formula. Even though it takes, about a good year, you found success over and over and over again.
Yes.
That's something you can share with us, or is that in a book, or how do people find out about your 10-step process in case they're like ready and they're, they want to do the work? How do they
Well,
find that?
we can start the conversation. The book is For Better, for Worse, Forever: Discover
Okay.
the Path to
In the
Lasting
book.
Love. And that's on Amazon, and that's what the book is all about. And
Okay.
just to go through some of the steps, I mean, looking at your own and looking at your partner's family of origin, because the acorn does not fall far from the tree. So let's say somebody's growing up in a very violent home, an abusive home, or in a neglectful kind of home. You don't throw somebody away because they've had, bad luck. I mean, we don't get to choose our parents. But what you want to hear is something like this. I grew up in a really difficult situation. There was domestic violence. My parents divorced. Whatever. And I was so concerned that I would maybe repeat history that I've read. I've gone for therapy. I needed to get clarity about what happened so that I wouldn't be the same kind of father, or I wouldn't be the same kind of husband or mother. And so that the person, even though they've had a really difficult beginning, they've realized they've had a difficult beginning and they've done something so that they are not, because the acorn really does not fall far from the tree. And we move into situations that are in quotes familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And familiar may be abuse.
Oh, yeah.
Familiar may be neglect. So again, and you don't want to put the person on trial. The first date, I mean, this is not what you want to do, but to be able to share, I just want you to know what it was like for me growing up. I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family in Winnipeg, Canada, and this is what it was like. And I'm an only child. Of course, all of this is true. Um, so
Wow.
that you're going through a process. And I have a couple of chapters on skeletons in the closet, things like psychiatric problems and substance abuse of various different kinds. And you're going to be you're looking, you're asking questions. And in the beginning, I mean, people are not going to really show you, typically,
No, not.
there's skeletons in the closet. And things like communication and problem solving, I mean, that's always a wonderful, wonderful time. It's not always the prettiest time or the easiest time when
Yeah.
there's a problem. And then you start to see, what are we going to do? Is it going to be a blame game? Is it going to be avoidance? Is it going to be denial? How are we as a couple, how are we going to be able to work things out, which of course is critical. Another chapter on intimacy, emotional intimacy. You can have great emotional intimacy and have zero sexual attraction or sexual intimacy. To
Amazing.
understand the difference between emotional intimacy and physical and sexual intimacy, there's a chapter, how's your sex life? And there are many, many factors that go into having a good sex life. Are you in a good place, your relationship, looking at the sexual side effects of medications. And so it's very in-depth, and it forces us to really sort of look at the reality of all of these different things. There's a chapter on real compatibility. If you want 0 children and I want 3 children, we're already going to have a problem.
Yeah.
We may not be able to come to a compromise. Religion. There's many, many different areas that people have to be open, willing, and knowledgeable, so that we can talk about all this
Yeah.
and find out where are you at. And the end of the book ends, where there's 3 questions, and what I want and need in a relationship, what I don't want and need in a relationship, and the third is describe the reality of my relationship, having gone through this 10-step formula. And then there's things, the perfect person doesn't exist. So what things are you really willing to compromise on? What things are you unwilling to compromise on? And either way, however this plays out, it's a win-win situation. Because if
Correct.
you find out that what you want and need is exactly what you don't have, great. Don't waste any more time, and let's get out of this.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you may find that this is not, I mean, perfection doesn't exist. But you know what? This is really pretty great. And I am willing to make certain compromises that don't that don't take away my authenticity and integrity as a
Right.
person.
Sure.
So this takes a little bit of work. And but you come up with an honest assessment, self-assessment and partner assessment, and it's either a green light or a red light, but either light is good.
Good. Yeah. So I have to ask you this question because it's so perfect in alignment with what you're saying, because I love how your book, it sounds like it's a map, right? It helps
Yeah,
map
the
it
map.
helps map out, it gives you strategy. And it's one of those things that takes time. So here's a question I've got to ask you because I'm curious, because this is one of my self-indulgences. It's a guilty pleasure where I like to watch, like on Netflix, shows like Love is Blind or Married at First Sight.
Yes, yes, yes.
Romantic at heart. I'm a romantic at heart. So I want to know what your thoughts are about those TV shows. Those like, for example, Love is Blind or Married at First Sight. When people are watching those shows, what have you ever, do you watch those shows at all, or
I've watched
the guilty
I've
pleasure?
watched them. I've auditioned to be the expert guest on
Oh my gosh, how
on
funny. So
some of
what are
these.
your thoughts? Like, because a lot of it is condensed. I mean, Married at First Sight, you get married and then
Yeah,
you learn who you are. And then, like
yeah,
Love is Blind, you're in these pods where you don't see somebody. And I think
yeah,
it's only like, really, when it comes down to it, I think it's only like 4 or 5 days where you get to
yeah.
like,
I have real problems. As much as I wanted to be the expert resource to these shows and maybe give them another sort of idea or slant to incorporate into the shows. The shows can be really damaging, and we really have to get real. With the marriage, at first sight. You hear people saying, "Oh well, I looked at her, I looked at him, and I fell in love, and I knew it was love." I wish it was so. I wish it was so. It's not so. And I've been following the Bachelor and the Golden Bachelor. By the way, with the Golden Bachelor, I did everything possible and contacted every person in the media to try to get Teresa to not marry Jerry, the Golden Bachelor. There were so many red flags there, Terry. And in fact, I'm blocking. Oh my God, I'm blocking her name. A very, very famous Carol. Oh wow. Uh, hmm very famous psychotherapist who's written many, many, many books. I mean, she and I had her on my radio show, and she and I agreed that this was going to be a disaster if this Teresa married Jerry. Of course, they married, and there's been all sorts of fanfare, and she's in the media, highlight every single day. But here was a very interesting case where he lied about so many things that were discovered, and there was nobody in the media, I think, other than myself, who was willing to talk about this and warn Teresa that she was marrying a guy who was an admitted liar. And yet we ran with the Hollywood happily ever after story. And I really wonder how these two are doing. So yes, I think that people have to be very careful when they're watching these shows, because the shows, they give us a message that has basically nothing to do with reality.
correct. Yeah. That's why for me, it's a guilty pleasure. Like I see it as like this
Yeah,
fantasy that I'm like, oh, like personally, it's just, it doesn't make sense to me
right,
logically from a
right,
pragmatic
right.
point of view, but emotionally from that fantasy romantic aspect, I'm like, yeah, wouldn't that be great? That's that magic pill that you keep talking about. Like there's the answer and it's just not there.
It's
So,
not. And by the way, it's Carol Lieberman. Carol Lieberman
oh,
is a very, very well known psychotherapist, and but she and I, she was in California and here I am in New York, and we were emailing and wondering what was going to happen. And we both tried so hard to contact everybody in the media who was reporting that Jerry was an admitted liar, and nobody wanted to run with the
but
story.
yeah. I mean that, but that's a whole other tangent and a whole other topic about how the media is run. That's a
Right. Exactly.
It's a whole
Exactly.
other one, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, as a professional in your field and with all the experience that you had. So thank you for answering that, because I know it was like one of those questions that are kind of like weird, but I was genuinely curious. I had
Weird.
wanted
Great
to ask.
question. Great question. Great question. Because so many people watch these shows.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I'll be there with my girlfriend. Oh my God, did you on the text? Did you see what happened? And like, oh my God, and people are like that. You see that on TikTok. It's
Right.
kind it gets out of control and people forget that there is reality. Um,
Yes.
and that's where, it's like people like you and me got to bring it back to reality. Like this is
Yes.
actually happening. So this is what we have to work
Yeah.
with this.
Yes. Yes.
Beatty, it's been so wonderful getting to know you and to learn from you. And I appreciate you reaching out and saying, I want to do this podcast. And I'm like, yes, 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 let's do this. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge with everyone? If anybody wants to work with you or buy your book or any of that, how can people find you?
Well, let me just say it's been an absolute pleasure. And all people need to do is just go to beattycohan.com. All the contact information is there. They can watch videos, they can read articles, and hopefully, this will be on a really real basis for people, something that's helpful. The people, that there will be a takeaway, as I always say, an aha moment where, yeah, I think I'm going to do this, or I think maybe I'm not going to do this anymore.
I love that. I love that. I'm a truth seeker in my work, even though I'm a very spiritual and what people would call woo-woo person, but I'm also very pragmatic and practical. And I love that you were able to share these things with us. And I just like you, I really do hope people had some aha moments, and I hope they buy your book and follow your process as well. So thank you so much, Beatty. I'll also make sure that in the show notes, everybody has all the information, how they can contact you as well. And to everybody watching or listening here on the portal, thank you so much for being with us. We're very grateful that you are here, listening, watching, all the things. If you like this podcast, please like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends, because these messages that we bring to you are really important and hopefully help you navigate your life and give you some control over what your choices and decisions are. You get to choose your way through life, and hopefully we bring you information and data that you get to use and make your decisions from. So thank you so much for joining us here at the portal. Thank you so much, Beatty, for being here.
Pleasure.
And stay connected, everyone, and I'll see you on the flip side. Well, our time in this now moment together has ended, but another now moment is on its way. Thank you so much for joining me in this human journey and listening to this podcast, The Portal with Terrie Huberman. I sure hope you're getting something out of it. I'm here to help you clear anxiety from the past, align your energy into the present, and help you create your future. My prayer for you is to find the peace and calmness in any given now moment so you can recognize when blessings are afoot and you get to choose your next adventure. Be curious and stay connected. You can always find me at terriehuberman.com. Bye now.